Hey everyone, it is Clint. Welcome to Sweetcast. I want to talk about Chuck Dixon and some of his words of wisdom and, maybe go over some of this 90s comics stuff that he's talking about. Just a reminder that if you haven't subscribed to this channel, but maybe you watch it frequently, you catch it often, it might be a good idea to subscribe. That really, really helps me out quite a bit. And it also, gets you content faster. So it's a win-win situation and it's absolutely free. All right, so Chuck Dixon posted this on Twitter, and I found this interesting because, Chuck Dixon was around in the 90s. Not only that, he was a big part of comics in the 90s. And so he said comic sales are in the sad state that they're in because rather than build on the boom of the 90s, the publishers exploited it. Now, I know I've watched documentaries before on the 90s in comics and exactly what went down. I'll admit I wasn't really into comics in the 90s. I was aware of them. I was aware of all the collection craziness that was going on in the 90s with things like Beanie Babies, other things like that. It was a big thing, and now it is not. It's funny because I think it was the last video I made. I talked about the price of these crowdfunded books and the value on eBay, or this is the thing. Some people are like, well, say the value is going up, and then other people are like, well, it's just a bubble. It's not really that the value is going up. It's that speculators are out there buying these books, hoping that they're going to increase in value over time. I will say at the moment, both things can be true, right? The value is going up because people are willing to buy them for more at the moment, and that absolutely could change. I'm not going to pretend like, anything is invincible, okay? I'm just making an observation of what is existing right now. On the other hand, yes, the prices are going up because that's how much it costs to get these books that are already printed. Now, I suspect that a lot of people that are out there buying books and raising the value, once there's a reprint or something like that, the book becomes more available, prices would drop to some degree, just because people are interested in reading it solely, and it's not really about speculation. However, speculators are obviously going to be buying comics in bulk that they think are going to be raising in value or in price over time. Who knows? I'm not going to pretend to try and have a crystal ball and know the future. I'm just saying what it is right now. All right, so another thing is, in response to that video, I had several people say that it's kind of like the 90s comic boom. So I wanted to look into some of this, and the timing was great because Chuck Dixon mentioned this, that it wasn't necessarily because of some of the crazy stuff that happened in the 90s with comics. It had a lot to do with the publishers that exploited it. So I'm going to take a little journey. We're going to take a little journey to this article, The Comic Book Crash of the 90s and Why Comics Are Safe Today. First off, I think it is dangerous to say anything is safe today. That is a little presumptuous for sure, because this is a unique set of problems that the comic book industry is going through at the moment. And to say any of those problems resemble the 90s, I find that to be a really big stretch. I'm not sure I'm on board with that. But let's look at some of the reasoning behind this. And it does shed a little bit of light on it. I found this interesting. Okay, so there were three problems basically that created this perfect storm in the 90s. And you compare this to what happened, what's happening today in comics, and you tell me what kinds of similarities and what kind of differences there are. And I don't want to pass anybody by. If you don't know about the 90s comic bubble that burst, just in a nutshell, essentially comics were selling like mad in the 90s, and everybody was trying to get as many of these supposed key issues that they could and keep them in mint condition in order to make tons and tons of money off of them. The problem was that everyone was doing the same thing, and so there was no rarity in these books. And because of all the speculation and all that, the bottom really fell out of the market. I understand that is a very extremely simplified explanation. It's a lot more complicated than that, and there are going to be a few reasons here why. But I just wanted to cover that so you know what I'm talking about when I talk about comics in the 90s. All right, so here's the first problem in this article that they mentioned. Collectors and speculators misjudged the market. And just what made those newsworthy collectibles like the Wagner from the first appearance of Batman so valuable. This is a complicated thing. If everybody knew what made something valuable over time before it became valuable, then it wouldn't be valuable because everybody would know what's going to happen. You see how this works? If everybody knows and they have a perfect picture of how to bet on a racehorse, everybody's going to bet on the winning racehorse, and the outcome, I mean, you're not going to make the kind of money that you're hoping to because the odds all of a sudden are just terrible. How's that for a really bad gambling explanation from somebody who doesn't gamble at all? But I think you see what I'm saying here. It's like the tulip boom, right? That happened in Europe many years ago. The tulip bubble, everyone was buying these tulips up and selling them for more than they initially bought them for because, I don't know, for some reason, there was just this hype around it. People thought that they were something special, and that drove this demand. Now, something like tulips, once somebody decides that they're unwilling to pay the price that is being asked for this flower that is absolutely a luxury, then the price starts to drop and drop and drop and drop, and you get the idea. There has to be more behind the demand in order to keep prices at the level that they're at. And so, yeah, in the short term, things are going to jump up a lot, but is there enough demand for those and a little enough supply that it'll keep prices high? All right, so they misjudged it. There were a lot of things going on in the 90s, and a lot of the times with key issues, it's not like, oh, hey, let's make a book that's going to be a key issue that everybody's going to want. It essentially had been in comics, obviously, that they made comic books and they were such a disposable medium that they could be thrown away, torn up, shredded. You get the idea. So having one in great condition was extremely rare. So if all the books are kept in fantastic condition, does that matter at all? They're all the same, right? At that point, it just doesn't matter. And so, the other aspects of it were certain issues, like the death of Superman, for example, was supposed to be such an important landmark thing that happened in comics. The problem is when you tell everybody that it's an important landmark thing and they all believe it, everyone's buying it, it's being overprinted, you get the idea. Second part of the problem, okay, and this is interesting because it wasn't just speculators and collectors that were driving up prices. It was also the problem. I mean, they were driving up prices, but they weren't the sole contributors to the problems that happened in the 90s. Second, and I think this is where Chuck Dixon mentioned, and that is the exploitation from both publishers and distributors at the time in order to get and milk as much out of it as they could. All right, so I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but from what I'm reading from it, this is what I'm getting out of it, in that they made it so easy to start comic shops. They made it so that if you had $300, you could start a comic shop. Even you go from collector essentially to comic book retailer and access through Diamond Distribution to buy as many books as you like. And it even said that Wall Street investors were getting in on the action. That is insane if you think about it now. But yeah, they were getting in on the action just strictly because of the return on investments. Third, people got a little greedy, essentially. The third contributor to the cash was the publishers and corporate greed. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm all for corporations making money in rational ways. What doesn't make sense, I mean, I guess what they missed here was the long-term effects of the short-term cash grabs that were going on. And that obviously was a problem. So, make money, but why just all make it all at once and, ruin a good thing? All right. So, this dude, Ron Perlman. I'm not going to say his wrong. I keep wanting to say Ron Perlman. Wrong guy. But yeah, he bought Marvel and his goal was to make it more than just comics. It was, going to be multimedia and really just about having that intellectual property. And part of his plan, because it was such, it was an expensive purchase, $82.5 million. It's a lot of money. Today it seems insane to let it go for that little, especially if you're getting all those characters and that property. But that's what it was. And so in order for that to work, he raised the price from, in 1986, it used to be 65 cents for a single book. He raised it up to 125, and that actually sounds like an amazing price, and I'd be fine with that for comics. If you change that for inflation today, that's $2.17, which shows you a little bit about the pricing of comics today. All right, I'm going to scroll down here for a minute, and this is really fitting. We're talking about Chuck Dixon because there's his book right there, Nightfall, with Batman getting his back broken. Okay, so essentially it sums it up. There were no buyers, no comics, no value, and no money. That basically sums up the problem right there. So what kind of predatory practices, what were they doing wrong in the 90s, and what was actually working okay? Now, I still believe this despite how many people were against me in the last comment section, and that is, if you find a way to create demand for a product, that is a good thing. That's a positive thing. If you can have genuine demand in your product, and what I mean by that is not purely on speculation in that price will go up, because there is demand, not demand for the sake of demand, but demand for your product for the sake of your product. The Death of Superman had a lot of demand for it. Yes, because there were speculators, absolutely. And also because it sounds like a pretty significant issue, something that's a lot of drama, a lot of conflict. Maybe a lot of people were upset about it, all sorts of things. I get that. And so, but is that necessarily a bad thing? Well, I don't think so. I'm not going to comment specifically on that particular issue, but the idea of having something, big and dramatic happening in a book that people want to read just for the sake of getting the story and reading it, that's not a bad thing. Isn't that what comics are meant to do and have always done throughout history? I might even go as far as to say, as some of the sillier things, the flashier things, like right at the top here, it's funny, it mentions chromium. Remember all the chromium die cut polybagged acetane extremeness? That was the 1990s. I'm not even going to blame that. I don't think that there's anything necessarily wrong with any of that if it drives demand in the product because of the product, rather than because of speculation and that the price might go up. But are comics safe today? Now, if I look here, this is House of X 2019 Marvel. This is a single issue, House of X #1, and they have so many variant covers. It's funny because I know there's a lot of variant covers out there, but I hadn't really looked at how many variant covers are out there. And I gotta say, I think that, just like a lot of things in life, two things can be true at the same time. I don't think that variant covers are inherently evil. I'll say that again. And from my own personal experience, my book Downcast, I can tell you that I had two covers. I had cover A and cover B. If I did not have cover B, I don't know what would exactly would have happened. I still think the book would have been funded. Things would have been just great. But I can almost guarantee you that I would have made no profit off that book. It would have been a non-profit venture. That's kind of a big deal, right? Having one variant cover, if doing one book with a second cover is the difference between making a creator's time worth it, making that money, making the book, versus having it being a non-profit venture, I'd say go ahead and make a variant cover. Especially if consumers want it. They want to have something special, something unique, especially in that kind of a small publishing scenario. On the other hand, I think it can absolutely be taken to an extreme. There are a lot of, I think, really well-pointed criticisms of variant covers. So yeah, I am kind of taking the middle road here. Kind of. I mean, not really. One variant cover makes sense to me, A couple variant covers might make sense. But look at this. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I think right here we just passed into Lone Star variant cover territory. So that's 9. We've got 10, 11, 12, 13, sketch or blank issue, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Okay, there's 21. I was just going to keep on counting through the whole thing. 21 for House of X #1. That is a lot of variant covers. That's kind of insane. So ask me this, riddle me this. If we look back here at the problems that were going on, is this because, let's look at Chuck Dixon. Was this because there's a boom for comics, specifically House of X? Is there a boom going on? Or is this an example of publishers exploiting the boom? Which is it? When there's a lot of demand for a book, is this helping or is this exploiting it? Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'd love to know. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I can tell you guys, we are done editing Downcast. I'm so excited about it. It's funny, like we went through it with The editor we hired had another very professional editor go through it, had several just readers go through it. And then finally I had my wife read it after all of this, and she read it out loud to me, and she spotted like several errors that I'm like, how did everybody miss this but you? So yeah, my wife's amazing. That's on the record. That also means that the book is going to print this week. I'm working with the printer on some very specifics with the cover. Want everything to look nice and be 100%. So yeah, we're working with the printer. Hopefully it'll go to print this week. I have no idea how long it'll take, but I can tell you it is going to be printed in the United States, and that means that it'll get shipped to me sooner than it would if I got it printed overseas. So whether you're a backer that is overseas or stateside, it'll still be shipping to you sooner because I will have it sooner. So I think that is a good thing all around. Thanks very much, and I will see you next time.